The alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., just like it did every single day. Rachel's hand shot out from under the covers, fumbling to silence the piercing sound before it could fully wake her. She lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling of her tiny studio apartment, already feeling the exhaustion that would follow her through the next 16 hours. 2 jobs, that's what it took these days just to keep her head above water. She dragged herself out of bed and stumbled toward the bathroom. The mirror showed what she already knew. Dark circles under her eyes, hair that desperately needed proper care, and a face that looked older than her 28 years. When had she stopped recognizing herself? When had that bright-eyed girl with big dreams turned into this worn-out woman who could barely remember what hope felt like? The morning shift at the diner was the usual chaos. Coffee orders, pancakes, angry customers complaining about cold eggs. Rachel moved through it all on autopilot, her mind somewhere else entirely. During her 15-minute break, she sat in the back alley, eating a stale bagel and calculating numbers in her head for the 1,000th time. Hospital bills, rent, her brother's college tuition, utilities. The numbers never added up the way she needed them to. By 2 p.m., she was changing into her evening uniform, black slacks, white button-up shirt, and the little black vest that marked her as staff at the Grand Meridian. Now this was a different world altogether. The restaurant sat in the heart of downtown, the kind of place where people spent more on one meal than Rachel made in a week. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and prices that made her stomach turn. She'd been working there for 3 years now, ever since everything fell apart. "Table 12 needs water," called out Thomas, the head waiter, as Rachel tied her apron. She nodded, grabbing a pitcher and heading into the dining room. The Grand Meridian was already filling up with the early dinner crowd. Men in expensive suits, women dripping in jewelry, all of them speaking in those confident voices that came from never having to worry about money. Rachel moved between the tables like a ghost. That's what she'd learned to do, be invisible. Take the order, bring the food, clear the plates, and disappear. Don't make eye contact for too long. Don't engage in conversation unless absolutely necessary. She was part of the furniture, just another fixture in their luxury experience. But there was one thing in the Grand Meridian that Rachel couldn't ignore, no matter how hard she tried: the piano. It sat right in the center of the main dining room, a gorgeous Steinway grand piano that probably cost more than everything Rachel would earn in her entire lifetime. Every evening at 6 o'clock, a pianist would arrive and play for the dinner guests. Classical pieces, mostly. Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin. The music would float through the restaurant, and for those few hours, Rachel could almost forget where she was, almost forget who she used to be. She was refilling wine glasses at table 7 when the evening pianist arrived. His name was Gregory, a man in his 60s who had been playing at the Grand Meridian for over a decade. He settled onto the bench, adjusted his position, and began with a Chopin nocturne. Rachel's hand stilled for just a moment, her eyes closing involuntarily as the first notes drifted through the air. She knew that piece. Knew it in her bones, in her blood, in the muscle memory of fingers that hadn't touched piano keys in over 3 years. "Miss? Miss?" The sharp voice snapped her back to reality. The woman at table 7 was glaring at her, wine glass extended expectantly. Rachel apologized quickly, filling the glass with shaking hands. She couldn't afford to zone out like that. She needed this job. Needed both jobs, actually, if she had any hope of making next month's payments. During her break, Rachel did what she always did. She found a quiet corner near the piano, close enough to hear but far enough away that she wouldn't be noticed. Gregory was playing a Bach prelude now, and Rachel's fingers moved against her apron, pressing invisible keys in perfect synchronization with the music. Her co-workers had caught her doing this before, but they never said anything. They knew bits and pieces of her story, enough to understand that this wasn't just a casual interest. You really miss it, don't you? Rachel jumped. It was Linda, one of the other waitresses, standing beside her with a tray of dirty dishes. "Miss what?" Rachel tried to play it off, but Linda just gave her a knowing look. "The piano. I've seen you, you know. The way you look at it. The way your hands move." Linda shifted the tray to her other hip. "Why don't you ask Gregory if you can play sometime? I'm sure he'd let you during a break." Rachel shook her head quickly. No, I can't. That was a different life. I'm not that person anymore." "You sure about that?" Linda asked gently. But before Rachel could answer, Thomas was calling them both back to work. The rest of the evening blurred together in the usual way. More tables, more orders, more smiling at people who looked through her rather than at her. Around 9 o'clock, the restaurant started filling up even more. Apparently, there was some kind of charity event happening in the private dining area, Chicago's wealthy elite gathering, to throw money at whatever cause made them feel good about themselves. Rachel was assigned to serve drinks at the event. She walked into the private dining room carrying a tray of champagne glasses and immediately felt out of place. These people were on a completely different level. Designer dresses, expensive watches, the kind of casual confidence that came from never having struggled for anything. And there, right in the corner of the private dining room, was another piano. A beautiful baby grand sitting there like a decoration. Rachel's chest tightened. Did these people even realize what they had? Did they understand that some people would give anything, sacrifice everything just for the chance to touch those keys again? She made her way through the crowd, offering champagne and forcing polite smiles. One man caught her attention. Older, probably in his 60s, with sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. He was clearly the host of this event, the way people gravitated toward him, seeking his approval. There was something about his presence that commanded the room. Rachel tried not to stare, but she noticed him watching people. Not just talking to them, but really studying them, like he could read their entire life story just by looking. It made her nervous. She'd spent 3 years perfecting the art of being invisible, and she didn't like the way his eyes seemed to cut through all of that. She was clearing glasses from a nearby table when it happened. Gregory, who had been playing for the charity event, suddenly stood up from the piano looking pale. He whispered something to one of the event coordinators and then hurried toward the exit. Rachel heard fragments of conversation, something about feeling ill, needing to go home. The piano sat silent. The room, which had been filled with background music just moments ago, suddenly felt empty. People started to notice. Conversations faltered. The event coordinator looked panicked, whispering frantically into her phone, and Rachel, despite herself, couldn't take her eyes off that empty piano bench. She didn't notice the older man watching her. Didn't see the way his sharp eyes had followed her gaze to the piano, then back to her face. Didn't realize that her entire heart was written plainly across her expression. The longing, the loss, the desperate ache for something she'd been forced to give up. She had no idea that in the next few minutes, her entire life was about to change, that this powerful man was about to do something that would either give her back everything she'd lost or humiliate her in front of everyone she'd spent 3 years serving in silence. The moment was coming, and Rachel, lost in her own grief while staring at that silent piano, had no idea what was about to happen next. The silence in the room was getting uncomfortable. Rachel could feel it. That awkward tension when something goes wrong at an upscale event and nobody quite knows what to do about it. The event coordinator was still frantically making phone calls, trying to find a replacement pianist at 9:30 on a Friday night. Good luck with that, Rachel thought. She turned to head back to the kitchen when she heard footsteps approaching. Heavy, confident footsteps that made people instinctively step aside. Rachel glanced up and her heart sank. It was him, the older man with those sharp, calculating eyes, and he was walking straight toward her. "Excuse me." His voice was deep and commanding, the kind of voice that was used to being listened to. "You work here, correct?" "Yes, sir," Rachel replied automatically, keeping her eyes down the way she'd been trained. "Can I get you something? More champagne? An appetizer?" "No." He said it so firmly that Rachel's eyes snapped up to meet his. He was studying her with an intensity that made her want to shrink away. "I want you to answer a question honestly. Can you play?" Rachel's mouth went dry. "I'm sorry, sir." "Play what?" The man gestured toward the piano with one hand, never breaking eye contact. "Don't insult my intelligence. I've been watching you all evening. Every time you walk past that instrument, you look at it like it's a lost love. Your fingers move when you hear music. You know every piece that was being played tonight. I could see it in your face." Rachel felt her cheeks burning. She'd thought she was being subtle, invisible like always, but this man had seen right through her. I used to play. A long time ago, but that's not something I do anymore." "Why not?" The question was simple, but the way he asked it made it impossible to brush off with a polite answer. "Because life got in the way," Rachel said quietly. "And now I'm a waitress. That's all I am." The man's expression changed slightly. Not quite a smile, but something that suggested he understood more than he was letting on. "Life gets in the way for everyone. The question is whether we let it win." He paused, then raised his voice so the entire room could hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for a moment." Rachel's stomach dropped. No, 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 no. Whatever he was about to do, she wanted no part of it. The room quieted down, all eyes turning toward them. Rachel felt like she might throw up. The man, whoever he was, placed a hand on her shoulder. Not forceful, but definitely present. She was trapped. "It seems we've lost our pianist for the evening," he announced to the crowd, "but I believe we have someone here who can help us out." He looked down at Rachel, and there was something almost challenging in his eyes. "This young woman is going to play for us." The room erupted in murmurs. Rachel could feel dozens of pairs of eyes on her, and none of them were friendly. She could read their expressions easily enough. Who does she think she is? Just a waitress trying to get attention. "This should be embarrassing, sir. I really can't," Rachel whispered urgently. "I haven't played in years." "I don't even remember." "I don't believe that for a second," he interrupted. "You remember. People don't forget music like you clearly haven't forgotten it. The question is whether you have the courage to try." "But I'm working. I'll get in trouble. I could lose my job." Rachel was grasping at any excuse now. The man pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Rachel heard him speaking to someone, apparently the owner of the Grand Meridian based on the conversation. He hung up after 30 seconds. "You have permission. In fact, I've made it worth everyone's while. If you play one piece, just one, I'll donate $10,000 to the staff fund here. That money gets split among all the people who work in this restaurant." Rachel's head spun. $10,000? That would mean real money for Linda, for Thomas, for all the people in the kitchen who worked just as hard as she did. But at what cost? Public humiliation? Looking like a fool in front of all these wealthy people who already looked down on her? "I can see you're scared," the man said more quietly now. "But I didn't build everything I have by playing it safe. And you didn't learn to play piano, and yes, I know you did, by being afraid of challenges. One song, that's all I'm asking." The weight of the room pressed down on her. Rachel looked around and saw Linda standing by the doorway. Her coworker's eyes were wide, and she gave Rachel a tiny nod of encouragement. Thomas was there too, looking shocked but hopeful. $10,000, split among the staff. That could change lives. "I don't have sheet music," Rachel said weakly, her last line of defense crumbling. "Then play something from memory," the man replied simply. "Something that matters to you." Rachel's legs felt like they might give out as she walked toward the piano. Each step felt like walking toward her own execution. The crowd parted silently, and she could hear whispered comments. "This should be interesting. Poor thing is going to embarrass herself. Why would he put her on the spot like this?" She reached the bench and stood there for a moment, staring down at the keys. They looked foreign and familiar all at once. How long had it been? 3 years? 3 years since she'd played anything. 3 years since she'd walked away from Juilliard, from her scholarship, from everything she'd worked for since she was 6 years old, all because her mother got sick. All because someone had to pay the medical bills and her younger brother needed to finish college. Someone had to make the sacrifice, and that someone had been Rachel. She sat down slowly, adjusting the bench the way she remembered doing thousands of times before. Her hands hovered over the keys, and she could feel them shaking. The room was completely silent now. Even the skeptical observers had gone quiet, perhaps feeling the weight of the moment. Rachel closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She could feel her mother's presence somehow, could remember all those afternoons practicing in their small apartment, her mother sitting on the couch listening with her eyes closed, a small smile on her face. "You're going to be great someday, sweetheart. You're going to play for the world." But the world was cruel. The world took people too soon and left others behind to pick up the pieces. Her fingers touched the keys, and for a second, she almost pulled back. But then she thought about Linda and Thomas and everyone else who worked themselves to exhaustion just to survive. She thought about that $10,000 and what it could mean for people who never caught a break. And she thought about the girl she used to be, the one who lived and breathed music, the one who could lose herself completely in the sound of a piano. That girl was still in there somewhere, buried under exhaustion and grief and 3 years of just surviving. But still there, Rachel began to play. She chose Rachmaninoff, Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most technically demanding, emotionally devastating pieces ever written. She chose it because it was her mother's favorite. She chose it because if she was going to do this, really do this, she wasn't going to play it safe. The first notes came out hesitant. her fingers stumbling slightly over the keys. She heard someone in the crowd laugh quietly, and her face burned with shame. But she kept going. And then something happened. Muscle memory took over. Her fingers remembered what her mind had tried to forget. They flew across the keys, finding the patterns, the progressions, the soul of the piece. The music started pouring out of her, and with it came everything she'd been holding in for 3 years. The grief, the anger, the exhaustion, the loss of her mother, the death of her dreams, the loneliness of working 2 jobs and never seeing her brother, the humiliation of being invisible to people who had everything while she had nothing. It all came out through her fingers, through the piano, through the music that filled every corner of that room. And Rachel, with tears streaming down her face, finally let herself feel it all. For the first time in 3 years, she stopped just surviving and started living, even if only for the length of one piece of music. The room had gone completely silent. Not the uncomfortable silence from before, but something different, something reverent. And Rachel, lost in the music with her eyes closed and her heart breaking open, had no idea that she was about to receive the standing ovation of her life. The music swelled and crashed like ocean waves, and Rachel was drowning in it. Her fingers moved faster, pressing into the keys with a force that came from somewhere deep inside her chest. This wasn't just playing anymore. This was 3 years of silence screaming to get out. She hit the crescendo, the most technically brutal part of the piece, where most pianists would falter. Her hands crossed over each other in a blur, striking chords that required every ounce of strength and precision she had. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she wondered if she'd even make it through. Her fingers felt rusty, out of practice, but they kept moving, kept finding the notes like they'd never stopped. The tears were flowing freely now, dropping onto the keys, onto her hands. She didn't care. Didn't care about the room full of people watching her. Didn't care about the expensive dresses and the judgment and the whispered comments. For these few minutes, none of that existed. There was only the piano and the music and the memory of her mother's voice saying, "Play it like you mean it, sweetheart. Always play like you mean it." Rachel was playing like she meant it. The final notes came softly, gently, like a whisper after a storm. Her hands slowed, the music becoming tender and heartbreaking. She played the last chord and let it ring out, her foot holding the sustain pedal down until the sound faded into complete silence. For a moment, nothing happened. Rachel kept her eyes closed, her hands still resting on the keys, afraid to look up and see the faces of the people she'd just exposed her entire soul to. She could hear her own breathing, ragged and uneven, could feel her heart pounding so hard it hurt. Then someone started clapping. It was slow at first, deliberate. The older man who'd pushed her to play. Then another person joined in. And another. Within seconds, the entire room erupted into applause so loud it made Rachel jump. She opened her eyes, blinking away tears, and what she saw made her breath catch in her throat. Everyone was standing. Every single person in that room was on their feet, clapping with an intensity that seemed almost desperate. Some of them were crying too. A woman in a stunning red dress had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. A man in an expensive suit was wiping his eyes with his handkerchief, not even trying to hide it. Rachel stood up from the bench on shaky legs, completely overwhelmed. The applause continued, getting louder somehow. Linda was standing in the doorway, crying openly and clapping so hard her hands must have hurt. Thomas was beside her, looking absolutely stunned. The older man approached her, and the room gradually quieted down, though people were still wiping their eyes and whispering to each other in amazed voices. "What's your name?" he asked, and his voice was gentler than it had been before. "Rachel," she managed to say, her voice barely working. "Rachel Porter." "Rachel Porter," he repeated like he was committing it to memory. "That was extraordinary. Where did you train?" Rachel hesitated. This was the part she hated talking about, the part that still hurt like an open wound. "Juilliard," she said finally. "I had a scholarship, but I had to leave." "Juilliard?" A woman's voice cut through the crowd. Rachel looked over and saw an elegant woman in her 50s pushing through the other guests. She was staring at Rachel with an expression of complete shock. "Did you say Juilliard? Rachel Porter from Juilliard?" Rachel nodded, confused. "Yes, but I don't think we've ever—" 3.5 years ago, the woman interrupted, walking closer. "You were admitted with one of the highest audition scores they'd ever seen. You were supposed to start in the fall semester and then you just disappeared. The school tried to reach you, but you disconnected your phone, changed your address. We searched for you. Rachel felt like the floor was tilting under her feet. Who are you? Dr. Helen Chen. I'm the conductor of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. But 3.5 years ago, I was on the selection committee at Juilliard. I was one of the people who voted to give you that scholarship. Dr. Chen's eyes were intense, searching Rachel's face. Do you have any idea how rare your talent is? We don't give up on students like you. Why did you leave? The room had gone completely silent again, but this time everyone was waiting for Rachel's answer. She felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that was somehow worse than playing the piano had been. My mother got sick, Rachel said quietly. Cancer, stage 4. The treatments were expensive and insurance didn't cover everything. I had a younger brother who was still in high school, and someone had to work. Someone had to pay the bills and take care of things. She paused, fighting back a fresh wave of tears. My mother passed away 2 years ago. By then, I'd been out of school too long. Too much debt. Too much everything. I couldn't go back. Dr. Chen's expression softened. Oh, Rachel, did anyone at Juilliard tell you about the hardship fund? About the emergency stipends we offer to students in exactly your situation? Rachel's stomach dropped. What? We have resources for students facing family emergencies. Medical expenses, housing, everything. It's part of the scholarship program, but you left before the orientation where they explain all of that. We tried to reach you to tell you, sent letters, made calls, but you'd already disappeared. The words hit Rachel like a physical blow. All this time, all these years of struggling, of working herself to exhaustion, of giving up everything she'd ever wanted. And there had been help available. Help she'd never known about because she'd been too proud, too desperate, too scared to ask. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know. The older man who'd started all of this spoke up again. Well, now you do, and now we can fix this. He looked around the room at all the wealthy guests. I'm Vincent Castellano, and I didn't make my fortune by letting talent go to waste. Here's what's going to happen. Rachel, what do you owe? Medical bills, rent, whatever it is. Rachel shook her head. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. How much? The number felt shameful to say out loud. About $75,000. Between the hospital bills and my brother's college, and consider it paid, Vincent said simply, like he was ordering coffee. But that's not all. Dr. Chen, can you use a pianist of Rachel's caliber? Dr. Chen's face lit up. Are you serious? I'd hire her in a heartbeat. We have a guest soloist position opening up next month. The audition is just a formality at this point. After what I just heard, she's already in. Rachel couldn't breathe. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. And I'm setting up a foundation, Vincent continued, addressing the room now, in honor of Rachel's mother. It'll help other talented students who face the same situation she did. Medical emergencies shouldn't destroy dreams. Who's with me? Hands shot up all over the room. People were pulling out phones, making pledges, calling out numbers. Within minutes, Vincent's assistant was writing down commitments that totaled over $500,000. Rachel stood there in her waitress uniform, completely overwhelmed, watching her entire life transform in real time. Linda was crying happy tears, jumping up and down. Thomas was grinning so wide his face looked like it might break. A man in a suit approached with a business card. I run a classical music label. We'd love to talk to you about recording. What you just played, the world needs to hear that. Another woman joined in. I'm a concert promoter. I can book you in venues across the country. They kept coming one after another, offering opportunities that Rachel had thought were lost forever. But through it all, she kept looking at Vincent, the man who'd seen something in her that she'd forgotten was there. Why? She finally asked him when there was a brief pause in the chaos. Why did you do this? You didn't even know me. Vincent's expression grew serious. Because 40 years ago I was a kid from nothing working in a kitchen and someone gave me a chance. Someone saw past the apron and the minimum wage and recognized that I had something to offer. They pushed me to try, even when I was scared. That push changed my life. He smiled slightly. Today I'm returning the favor. The question is, Rachel, are you ready to stop being invisible? Rachel looked around at the room full of people who were no longer looking through her but at her. Really seeing her. She thought about her mother, about the dreams she'd buried, about the music that had never really left her. Yes, she said, her voice stronger now. I'm ready. And for the first time in 3 years, Rachel Porter believed it. The next morning, Rachel woke up in her tiny studio apartment and for a moment thought it had all been a dream. The performance, the applause, Vincent Castellano promising to pay off her debts, Dr. Chen offering her a position with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. All of it felt too impossible to be real. Then her phone buzzed, and buzzed again, and didn't stop buzzing. She grabbed it from the nightstand and stared at the screen in disbelief. 47 missed calls, over 200 text messages. Her social media accounts were exploding with notifications. What on earth was happening? Rachel opened her messages. The first one was from her brother David, at college 3 hours away. Rachel, you're viral! Call me right now! Viral, what did that mean? She scrolled through more messages. Friends she hadn't talked to in years, former classmates from high school, even her old piano teacher from childhood. Everyone was sending her the same thing. Links to videos with titles like Waitress Stuns, Millionaire's Party with Incredible Piano, Performance and Hidden, Talent Discovered at Charity Event. With shaking hands, Rachel clicked on one of the links. And there she was. Someone had recorded her entire performance last night. The video showed her sitting at the piano, tears streaming down her face, completely lost in the music. The camera captured everything. The emotion, the technical brilliance, the raw vulnerability of the moment. The video had been posted just 8 hours ago. It already had over 3 million views. Rachel dropped the phone on her bed, her heart racing. 3 million people had watched her play. 3 million strangers had seen her cry, had witnessed the most private moment of her life. She didn't know whether to feel terrified or amazed. Her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but something made her answer it. Rachel, this is Vincent Castellano. I hope I'm not calling too early. Mr. Castellano, Rachel managed to say, still processing everything. No, I'm awake. I just saw the videos. I can't believe that you're famous? Vincent chuckled. Believe it. My assistant has been fielding calls all morning. News stations want interviews. Talk shows want you as a guest. But before all that, we need to take care of business. Can you meet me at my office at 10? Rachel glanced at the clock. It was 8:30. I have to work at the diner at 9. Not anymore, you don't, Vincent said matter-of-factly. I spoke to your manager at both places. You're released from both positions with 2 months severance pay. You need to focus on your music now, not scrambling eggs and serving wine. Rachel sat down hard on her bed. You can't just do that. I need those jobs. I have bills, which are being paid as we speak, Vincent interrupted.
My lawyer is already working on it.
By end of business today, all your medical debt will be cleared. Your brother's college tuition for the rest of his time at school? Covered. Your rent for the next year? Handled. You need to stop thinking like someone who's drowning and start thinking like someone who has a future. Rachel felt tears welling up again. She'd cried more in the last 12 hours than she had in years. I don't know what to say. Say you'll be at my office at 10. We have a lot to discuss. Vincent paused. And Rachel? Bring your brother. I want to meet him. He's flying in this morning. I sent a car to pick him up from campus. The call ended before Rachel could respond. She sat there for a moment, completely overwhelmed, then jumped up and looked at her closet. What did you wear to meet a billionaire who was changing your entire life? Everything she owned was either a uniform or cheap clothes she'd bought at thrift stores. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Linda from the restaurant. Girl, have you seen the news? You're everywhere. And Thomas said Vincent Castellano left us all a bonus last night. $5,000 each. Rachel, you changed all our lives. Rachel smiled through tears. At least something good had come to her coworkers from all this chaos. By 9:45, she was standing outside a gleaming office building in downtown Chicago, wearing her best pair of jeans and a simple blouse, feeling completely out of place. A sleek black car pulled up and her brother David jumped out, practically tackling her with a hug. Are you kidding me right now? He shouted, not caring that people on the street were staring. My sister is a viral sensation. Do you know how many people at school are freaking out? My roommate was like, dude, isn't that your sister? And I was like, yeah, that's my sister. Rachel laughed, really laughed, for the first time in forever. David calmed down. This is all crazy. I don't even know what's happening. What's happening is you're finally getting what you deserve, David said, his expression turning serious. Mom would be so proud, Rach, you gave up everything for us. And now the universe is paying you back. They went up to Vincent's office together. And if Rachel thought the outside of the building was impressive, the inside was something else entirely. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Art that probably cost more than most people's houses. And Vincent sitting behind a massive desk, standing up to greet them with a warm smile. David, I presume, Vincent said, shaking her brother's hand. Your sister speaks very highly of you. Majoring in engineering, I hear? David nodded, starstruck. Yes, sir. Computer engineering. Good field, Vincent approved. We'll talk about internships later. But first, business with your sister. He gestured for them both to sit and pulled out a folder. Rachel, I've had my team working overnight. Here's where we stand. All your debts are cleared as of an hour ago. You'll receive confirmation emails by end of day. Your brother's tuition is set up through a trust. No more worrying about payments. He slid papers across the desk. This is a contract from Riverside Records. They want to sign you for a 3-album deal. The advance alone is $200,000. My lawyer looked it over. It's a good deal. Fair terms, but you don't have to sign today. Take time to think about it. Rachel stared at the papers like they might bite her. $200,000? For making music. And this, Vincent continued, sliding over another document, is from Dr. Chen. Official offer for the guest soloist position with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Salary is $90,000 a year plus benefits. The position starts next month, giving you time to practice and prepare. I don't understand, Rachel whispered. Yesterday I was serving drinks. Today I'm signing record deals? Yesterday you were invisible, Vincent corrected. Today the world sees you. That's the difference. Talent was always there. Opportunity wasn't, now it is. He leaned back in his chair. But I didn't bring you here just to hand you papers. I want to talk about something more important. The foundation? The foundation? Rachel repeated. The one I'm creating in your mother's name. The Catherine Porter Foundation for Emerging Artists. Its mission is simple, to help talented students who face medical crises, family emergencies, any situation that might force them to give up their dreams. You know firsthand what that's like. I want you involved in running it. Rachel felt her throat tighten. Her mother's name on a foundation that would help people like her. It was almost too much. I'd be honored. But Mr. Castellano, I have to ask, why are you doing all this? And please don't tell me it's just because someone helped you once. This is beyond that. Vincent was quiet for a moment and something shifted in his expression. He looked older suddenly, more vulnerable. 20 years ago, I had a daughter. She was brilliant, talented, wanted to be a painter. She got sick when she was 19. Leukemia. We had all the money in the world for treatment, but it wasn't enough. She didn't make it. The room went silent. Rachel could feel her brother's hand finding hers, squeezing tight. Before she died, Vincent continued, his voice rough. She made me promise something. She said, Dad, don't let your money just sit there. Find people with dreams and help them. Be the miracle someone needs. I've tried to honor that promise every day since. And last night, when I saw you looking at that piano with such longing, I saw my daughter. I saw someone with a gift that the world needed to witness. Rachel stood up and walked around the desk. She did something that probably nobody ever did to Vincent Castellano. She hugged him. He seemed surprised for a moment, then hugged her back, and Rachel could feel him shaking slightly. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for pushing me. Thank you for everything. When they separated, Vincent was wiping his eyes, trying to maintain his composure. Well, he said, clearing his throat. That's enough emotion for one day. Now we have practical matters. You need a piano. A good one. I'm having a Steinway delivered to a new apartment I've arranged for you. Bigger place, better neighborhood. You can't practice in a studio apartment. Mr. Castellano. Vincent, he corrected. And before you say it's too much, let me stop you. You're investing in your career. This is what professionals do. You're not a waitress anymore, Rachel. You're a musician. Start living like one. David was grinning so wide he looked like he might explode. Rachel looked at her brother, then at Vincent, then at all the papers on the desk representing a future she'd stopped believing in. Okay, she said finally. Okay, I'll do it. All of it. Good, Vincent said. Because you have a press conference in 2 hours. The world wants to hear from the viral piano prodigy. Better get ready to tell your story. As they left the office, David threw his arm around Rachel's shoulders. So, sis, what does it feel like to have your life completely change in 24 hours? Rachel thought about it. About the years of struggle and sacrifice. About her mother's death and the dreams she'd buried. About one night, one piano, one chance to be seen. It feels like I can finally breathe again, she said. And for the first time since she was 24 years old, that was the absolute truth. 3 months later, Rachel stood backstage at Symphony Center, her hands trembling as she adjusted her concert dress for the 100th time. Through the curtain, she could hear the orchestra warming up, the scattered notes of violins and cellos blending into a chaotic melody that somehow calmed her nerves. Tonight was her debut performance with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Her first major concert since that night at the Grand Meridian that had changed everything. "You're going to be amazing," David said from behind her. He'd driven in from college for the performance just like he'd promised. "Seriously, Rach, I've never seen you this prepared." He was right about that. The last 3 months had been a whirlwind of practice, preparation, and transformation. The new apartment Vincent had arranged was beautiful. A 2-bedroom place with huge windows and enough space for the Steinway grand piano that now dominated the living room. Rachel had spent 8 to 10 hours a day practicing, rebuilding the calluses on her fingers, retraining muscles that had gone too long without proper use. But it wasn't just about the physical practice. Dr. Chen had worked with her personally, helping her understand not just how to play but how to perform, how to connect with an audience, how to let the music speak through her rather than just playing the notes correctly. 5 minutes. "Miss Porter," a stagehand called out, and Rachel felt her stomach flip. Linda appeared at her side, dressed in a beautiful evening gown that Rachel had helped her pick out. Several of Rachel's former co-workers from the Grand Meridian had bought tickets to tonight's show, and Vincent had upgraded all of them to box seats. "You've got this, honey. We're all out there rooting for you." Rachel hugged her tight. Despite everything that had changed, she'd made sure to stay connected to the people who'd supported her when she was at her lowest. She'd even gone back to the Grand Meridian for dinner last week, this time as a guest rather than an employee. It had felt surreal sitting at a table and being served by people who used to be her colleagues. "Rachel," Dr. Chen appeared looking elegant in a black dress. "It's time. Are you ready?" Was she ready? Rachel thought about the journey that had brought her here. The years of struggle, the night her mother died, when Rachel had been too exhausted from working double shifts to even make it to the hospital in time, the grief that had nearly swallowed her whole, the moment she'd sat down at that piano 3 months ago, terrified and broken, and found herself again through music. "I'm ready," she said, and meant it. The stage lights were blinding at first. Rachel walked out to thunderous applause, her heart pounding so hard she thought the audience might hear it. She could see Vincent in the front row, sitting next to David. Linda and Thomas were in the box seats, waving enthusiastically. The theater was packed. Nearly 3,000 people had come to hear her play. She sat at the grand piano positioned at the center of the stage, adjusted the bench and took a deep breath. Dr. Chen raised her baton, and the orchestra prepared. This was it. This was the moment Rachel had been dreaming of since she was 6 years old and first discovered that she could make magic with her fingers and a keyboard. The piece they'd chosen was the same one she'd played that night at the Grand Meridian, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. But this time she wasn't crying. This time, she wasn't playing from a place of grief and desperation. This time she was playing from a place of hope. The orchestra began, and Rachel came in at exactly the right moment. Her fingers flew across the keys, but there was a lightness to it now, a joy that hadn't been there before. She could feel the music flowing through her, connecting her to every person in that audience. She could see her mother's face in her mind, smiling with that proud expression she used to get during practice sessions. The first movement ended to enthusiastic applause, but Rachel barely heard it. She was already focused on the second movement, the slow, heartbreaking section that required every ounce of emotional control she had. This was where performers either connected with their audience or lost them entirely. Rachel played it like a conversation with her mother, like she was telling her about everything that had happened, about the struggles and the victories, about how she'd lost her way and then found it again. The music swelled and quieted, ebbed and flowed, and when she glanced up, she could see people in the audience with tears streaming down their faces. The final movement was triumphant. Fast, powerful, demanding every bit of technical skill she possessed. Rachel attacked it with confidence, her hands moving so quickly they were almost a blur. The orchestra matched her energy, the violins soaring, the percussion driving the rhythm forward. She could feel the electricity in the room, could sense that everyone was completely captivated. The final chord rang out, and for a moment, there was absolute silence. Then the entire theater exploded. People were on their feet instantly, applauding so loudly it was almost deafening. Rachel stood and took a bow, overwhelmed by the response. Dr. Chen was beaming, applauding along with the orchestra members. Vincent was wiping his eyes, clapping enthusiastically. David was shouting and cheering, not caring at all about concert etiquette. Rachel bowed again, and the applause continued. 3 curtain calls, 4 or 5. People were throwing flowers onto the stage. Someone was chanting, "Encore, encore," and soon the whole theater had joined in. Dr. Chen gestured for her to play something else, and Rachel knew exactly what she wanted to do. She sat back down at the piano and played a simple piece, a lullaby her mother used to sing to her when she was little, which Rachel had arranged for piano years ago. It was short, sweet, and achingly tender. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Backstage afterward, Rachel was swarmed by well-wishers. Reporters wanted interviews. Music critics were calling it the performance of the decade. Other musicians wanted to collaborate. It was overwhelming and wonderful and exhausting all at once. Vincent found her in the chaos and pulled her aside. "How does it feel?" he asked simply. Rachel thought about it. "It feels like coming home," she said. "Like I spent 3 years lost in the wilderness and now I finally found my way back." "Your mother would be proud," Vincent said softly. "And my daughter would be too. She'd love knowing that something good came from my promise to her." "Speaking of which," Rachel said, "I wanted to talk to you about the foundation. I've been thinking about what else we could do. There are so many talented kids out there who don't even get the chance to audition because they can't afford lessons or instruments. What if we created a program that provided free music education in underserved communities?" Vincent's face lit up. "I love it. Let's make it happen." "You know what? You're not just a talented musician, Rachel. You're going to change lives. You already have." David bounded over, still buzzing with excitement. That was incredible. "Did you see the standing ovation? It just kept going and going." "I saw," Rachel laughed, hugging her brother. "Thank you for being here, for always believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." "That's what family does," David said simply. Later that night, after all the interviews and celebrations had died down, Rachel found herself alone in her apartment, sitting at her piano. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, not quite pressing down hard enough to make sound. On the music stand was a photo of her mother, the same one she'd kept for years. "We made it, Mom," she whispered. "It took the long way around, and there were times I thought we wouldn't, but we made it." Her phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. "Your album drops next week. Pre-orders are through the roof. The Catherine Porter Foundation officially launched today. We already have 50 students enrolled in the music program. Check the news." Rachel opened her news app, and there it was, a feature story about the foundation with her mother's photo and the mission to help struggling artists. The article talked about Rachel's story, about second chances, about how one moment of courage could ripple out and change countless lives. She thought about that night 3 months ago, when she'd been terrified to sit down at that piano, when she'd been convinced that her dreams were dead and buried with her mother, when she'd felt invisible and forgotten and lost. One man had seen her. One person had refused to let her hide. One moment had transformed everything. Rachel started playing softly, a new piece she'd been composing. It wasn't finished yet, but it was getting there. It was about struggle and hope and the long road back to yourself. She was going to call it Second Chances, and she was dedicating it to her mother, to Vincent's daughter, and to everyone who'd ever had to give up their dreams but found them again. Because that's what life was really about, Rachel had learned. Not avoiding the fall, but having the courage to get back up. Not never losing your way, but finding the strength to come home. She played late into the night, and for the first time in years, Rachel Porter was exactly where she was meant to be. The waitress uniform was long gone. The exhaustion had faded. The grief had transformed into something else, not gone, but woven into the music, making it richer and deeper and more real. And somewhere, in the space between the notes and the silence, Rachel could feel her mother smiling. Could feel the love of everyone who'd believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. Could feel the weight of purpose settling onto her shoulders. Not a burden, but wings. She was finally flying. And she was never coming down again. 1 year later, Rachel stood in the lobby of the Catherine Porter Foundation building, watching dozens of young musicians filing in for their weekly lessons. The building Vincent had purchased was modest but beautiful, with practice rooms on every floor and a small concert hall where students could perform for their families. She still couldn't believe this place existed. Couldn't believe she was running it. Miss Rachel, a small voice called out, and Rachel turned to see Lily, an 8-year-old violin student, running toward her with a huge smile. Lily's family had immigrated from Mexico 2 years ago, and her parents worked double shifts at a factory to make ends meet. Through the foundation, Lily got free violin lessons, a rental instrument, and even sheet music. "Hi, sweetheart," Rachel said, kneeling down to Lily's level. "Are you ready for your lesson today?" "I learned the whole song," Lily announced proudly. "The one about the twinkle stars. Want to hear it?" Rachel laughed. "I would love to hear it, but let's save it for your teacher. She'll be so excited to see how hard you've been practicing." As Lily skipped away toward her lesson, Rachel felt a familiar warmth in her chest. This was why she'd started working with the foundation. Not just the performances or the recording contracts, but moments like these, watching kids discover music the same way she had all those years ago. The foundation now served over 300 students across Chicago. Kids from families who could never afford private lessons, instruments, or the countless other expenses that came with musical education. The program provided everything for free, funded by donations from Vincent and the growing list of supporters who'd heard Rachel's story. "You look happy," a voice said behind her. Rachel turned to find Michael, the foundation's music director, carrying a stack of sheet music. He'd joined the team 6 months ago, a former conservatory professor who'd fallen in love with the mission. "I am happy," Rachel admitted. "Sometimes I feel guilty about it, though. Like I don't deserve all this after spending so many years feeling sorry for myself." Michael shook his head. "You weren't feeling sorry for yourself. You were surviving. There's a difference. And now you're helping other people do more than just survive." He was right, but Rachel still struggled sometimes with the dramatic change in her circumstances. The album had been a massive success, spending 12 weeks at the top of the classical music charts. The concerts were selling out months in advance. She'd even been invited to perform at Carnegie Hall next spring. But the real success, the thing that mattered most, was what was happening right here in this building every day. "Speaking of which," Michael continued, "I wanted to talk to you about James, the teenager from the South Side, the one who plays piano." Rachel knew exactly who he meant. James was 15, lived with his grandmother in a neighborhood where music programs had been cut from schools years ago due to budget issues. He'd been coming to the foundation for 8 months now, and his progress was remarkable. "What about him?" Rachel asked. "He's ready for advanced training, way beyond what we can offer here. I think he needs to audition for a real conservatory program." Michael paused. "The problem is, even with scholarships, there are still costs. Living expenses, travel, all the extras. His grandmother is on a fixed income." Rachel smiled. "Set up the audition. I'll handle the rest." "Rachel, that could be $50,000 a year, maybe more." "Then it's $50,000 well spent," Rachel replied. "That's exactly what this foundation is for. Besides, Vincent just approved expanding our scholarship fund. We can support 5 students at conservatory level this year." Michael grinned. "Sometimes I forget you're not just the face of this place. You actually run it." "We run it," Rachel corrected. "This only works because of people like you who believe in these kids." The afternoon flew by in a blur of meetings, lesson observations, and administrative work. Rachel loved the busy chaos of it all. She'd never thought she'd enjoy the business side of running a foundation. But there was something deeply satisfying about building something that would outlast her own career. Around 4 o'clock, Vincent stopped by for his weekly visit. He made a point of coming to the foundation regularly, not to check up on things, but because he genuinely enjoyed seeing the programs in action. "How's our newest piano star doing?" he asked, settling into a chair in Rachel's office. "James? He's incredible. Michael thinks he's ready for conservatory training. Then let's make it happen, Vincent said without hesitation. That's why we're here. Rachel looked at him across the desk, this man who'd changed her life with one act of bold kindness. Do you ever regret it? Taking such a big risk on a stranger? Vincent considered the question seriously. You know what I regret? Waiting so long to do something like this. I spent 20 years after my daughter died just making money, thinking that was enough. But money without purpose is just paper. What we're doing here, what you've built, this has purpose. What I've built, Rachel laughed. You're the one who pays for everything. Money is the easy part, Vincent replied. Vision is harder. Leadership is harder. You took an idea and turned it into something real. These kids don't just need funding, Rachel. They need someone who understands their dreams because she lived them. They need someone who knows what it's like to almost lose everything and find a way back. That's not something money can buy. Before Rachel could respond, there was a knock on the door. Michael peeked in with an excited expression. Sorry to interrupt, but I think you both need to see this. He handed Rachel a tablet showing a news article. Look at the headline. Rachel read aloud. From Chicago to the world, Catherine Porter Foundation model spreads to 10 cities. Her eyes widened as she scanned the article. Organizations in New York, Los Angeles, Atlanta, and 7 other cities had started their own versions of the foundation, using their model to provide free music education to underserved communities. We're not just helping kids in Chicago anymore, Michael said. We're inspiring programs everywhere. The foundation's success has created a movement. Rachel felt overwhelmed. When she'd started working with Vincent to create the foundation, she'd hoped to help a few dozen kids in their city. She'd never imagined it would spread like this. There's more, Michael continued, barely able to contain his excitement. The National Education Foundation wants to partner with us. They're offering to help fund similar programs in 50 cities over the next 3 years. Vincent stood up, a huge smile spreading across his face. Well, Rachel, it looks like you're about to get very busy. That evening, Rachel found herself back at her apartment, sitting at her piano as she did most nights. But instead of practicing for her next concert, she was playing softly, thinking about everything that had happened. A year ago, she'd been invisible. A waitress working double shifts convinced her dreams were buried forever. Now she was recording albums, performing with orchestras, and running a foundation that was changing lives across the country. But the most amazing part wasn't her own transformation. It was watching kids like Lily and James discover their own potential. It was seeing their faces light up when they mastered a difficult piece or performed for their families for the first time. Her phone buzzed with a text from David, who was now in his final year of college and already had a job lined up at a tech company. Saw the news about the foundation expanding. Mom would be so proud. You're changing the world, sis. Rachel smiled, looking at the photo of her mother that still sat on her piano. Her mom had always believed that music could heal, could bring people together, could make the world a little brighter. The foundation was proof that she'd been right. Another text came in, this one from Vincent. Board meeting tomorrow at 9. Big news to share. Also, I have someone I want you to meet. A documentary filmmaker who wants to tell the foundation's story. A documentary. Rachel shook her head, amazed at how her life kept expanding in ways she never could have predicted. She'd gone from hiding in the background to potentially having her story told to millions of people. But that wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was that somewhere in Chicago tonight, a kid was practicing violin in a cramped apartment, dreaming of performing on a big stage. What mattered was that tomorrow, that same kid would walk into the foundation building and get the lesson that would bring them one step closer to their dream. Rachel began playing again, a new piece she'd been working on. She was calling it The Ripple Effect, and it was about how one moment of kindness could spread outward in ways you never imagined. About how helping one person could end up helping hundreds, then thousands. She played late into the night, composing and dreaming and planning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to make a difference. But tonight she was content to sit with her music and remember how it all started. With one man who refused to let talent go unnoticed. With one moment of courage at a piano. With one decision to stop being invisible and start living out loud. The ripples were still spreading, and Rachel couldn't wait to see where they'd go next.